Good evening, dear followers. Today we'll speak about Russian-Ukrainian war. Putin relying on U.S. attention deficit disorder to win war. CIA chief says. Ukraine updates. Published February 26, 2023, USA Today. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not a sentimentalist when it comes to the massive loss of life his troops are facing in Ukraine and believes he can exhaust Ukraine and the West and ultimately win the war. Central Intelligence Agency Director Bill Burns said Sunday. Burns, speaking on CBS Face the Nation, said the United States must provide full material and intelligence support in coming months to puncture that hubris on Putin's part and regain momentum on the battlefield. He said Putin is convinced he can't afford to lose, so he will attempt to drag out the war. Putin's view of Americans, of us, has been that we have attention deficit disorder and will move on to some other issues eventually, Vance said. So, instead of looking for ways to either back down or find a famous off ramp, you know, what Putin has done is double down. Friday marked a grim milestone. 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine. During this time, the United States pledged about 130 billion in assistance to Kiev, more than half in the form of military aid, according to United States Department of Defense. Amid domestic struggles ranging from spiraling living costs to rising refugee arrivals, polls show Americans are growing less enamored with providing arms to Ukraine. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the anniversary of Russia's occupation of Ukraine's Crimea, tweeting, 9 years ago, Russian aggression began in Crimea. By returning Crimea, we will restore peace. This is our land, our people, our history. We will return the Ukrainian flag to every corner of Ukraine. NATO can provide Ukraine with 62 of the German-made Leopard 2 tanks, and then we will see how the course of the war changes after that. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius told the Deutschlandfunk radio network Sunday. Ukraine has requested 300 tanks. Putin accuses West of trying to destroy Russia. The West wants to eliminate Russia, and ethnic Russians may not survive as a distinct people if the West succeeds, Putin said in an interview Sunday on state-owned TV. Putin accused the United States and its allies of having one goal: to disband the former Soviet Union and its fundamental part, the Russian Federation. His speech that the West is conspiring against Russia has been a recurring theme in Putin's effort to tamp down anti-war dissent. There will be Moscovites, Uralians, and others, he said of Russia's possible fragmentation into regional groupings. The West could only partly accept Russia into the so-called family of civilized peoples. breaking the country into separate pieces, he theorized. Putin also said Russia suspended participation last week in the New START nuclear treaty, START nuclear treaty, not only because of US nuclear capabilities, but those of other NATO countries. He said Russia can't accept US inspections of its nuclear sites while Washington and NATO allies seek Russia's defeat in Ukraine. But he reiterated that Moscow was not withdrawing from the pact, and his foreign ministry said Moscow would respect the treaty caps on nuclear weapons and continue notifying the United States about test launches of ballistic missiles. Ukraine says it repelled the latest Russian push near hotly contested Bakhmut. Russian forces have attacked almost 2 dozen communities near Bakhmut, a city in the Donetsk province and the focus of much of the fighting in the recent weeks, the Ukraine military said Sunday. The region remains divided between Ukrainian and Russian control, while Russia has seized most of the Luhansk province. Together they form the eastern Donbas region that has been the focus of Putin's war. Weeks of intense fighting with heavy casualties have barely moved the front lines. The owner of the Russian mercenary force Wagner Group, Evgeny Prigozhin, said his fighters had advanced into a settlement on Bakhmut's northern edge. But the Ukrainian military disputed that claim, saying Russian forces were repelled. The adversary keeps attacking the positions of Ukrainian troops. The Ukrainian military said on Facebook enemy offensives were unsuccessful. Saudi Arabia to provide Ukraine with $400 million in humanitarian aid. Saudi Arabia agreed to provide Ukraine with $400 million in humanitarian aid. Ukraine and Saudi officials said Sunday. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan led the kingdom's delegation to Kiev, meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the presidential residence. The prince also met with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba and Andrei Yermak, Zelensky chief of staff. Russia claims to have destroyed thousands of Ukrainian tanks. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed Sunday to have destroyed 390 Ukrainian airplanes, 211 helicopters, 3,243 drones, 405 air missile systems, 8,042 tanks and other armored fighting vehicles, and 1,045 fighting vehicles equipped with multiple launch rocket systems since the war began a year ago. The ministry also claimed 4,222 field artillery guns and mortars, as well as 8,556 units of special military vehicles, have been destroyed since the invasion began. The ministry did not estimate the number of Ukrainian soldiers or civilians it had killed, nor did it announce its own losses. Now, National Report Assessment and Assessment of February 24, 8 a.m. China says sending weapons will not bring peace. It wants to prevent the war from getting out of control and presents a 12-point peace plan. It does not call for a withdrawal of Russian forces or the end of maritime embargo. It argues against Ukrainian accession into NATO. It is not a peace plan. It is a diplomatic declaration in support of Russia. China might supply attack drones to Russia. Russia appears to be setting conditions for false flag operations in Chernihiv Oblast and Moldova. Russia is now likely primarily seeking to degrade the Ukrainian military rather than seizing new territory. It is likely pursuing a long-term operation where they bank that it will be eventually exhaust Ukraine. UK intelligence reports. Russia launched over 5,000 missiles and carried out nearly 3,500 strikes like last year. More than 140 UN member states vote in favor of Ukrainian peace formula. The United States would be ready to negotiate with Russia only on the basis of the 10-point peace formula. Russia war has set Ukraine back 15 years in overcoming poverty. Russia will only accept a peace agreement that supports its strategic interests. The United States and Europe should not fear a Russian defeat because the alternative is so much worse. They should instead commit to a Ukrainian victory. Russia disintegration and collapse are not and have never been the aim and objective of the West. It is a risk Russia accepted when it started waging war, and it is a risk that is reduced the moment it stops. A defeat requires a successful Ukrainian counter-offensive. Ukrainian bravery is unfortunately not enough. It almost needs the tools in the quality and quantity needs to evict around 326,000 soldiers supported by 1,500 fixed-wing aircraft. Counteroffensive is not likely to start before all or most of the uh, prerequisites are in place: range fire, combat aircraft, and sheer numbers might not be in place in this year. Some of the requirements are still being denied. The inflow of weapons is incremental and slow, limiting Ukraine's ability to engage Russian forces. Some, like air defense, are awaiting production and will not arrive for years. Still, Ukraine might attempt a counteroffensive before summer for lack of alternatives as time favors Russia. A military intervention might, in contrast, achieve something a Ukrainian counteroffensive cannot: end the war without further losses of lives, provide Putin with an acceptable off-ramp, save the Ukrainian economy and therefore the viability of the state, end the tsunami of ripple effects affecting the global cost of living and reducing the risk of political instability. It might not least re-establish NATO credibility, deterring other countries seeking expansion through the use of military force. The report and article elaborate. This report has been composed with the support from both media reports as well as official information published on various channels. UK, French, and German officials are reportedly preparing a NATO-Ukraine pact that falls short of the protection Ukraine would receive from NATO membership and could reflect a desire to press Ukraine to accept negotiable settlements on unfavorable terms. Key takeaways are and battlefield inflictions. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko plans to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, possibly to assist Russia and China in sanctions evasion, amidst reports that China is seriously considering sending Russia level aid. US President Joe Biden rejected China's 12-point peace plan as Russian sources continue to capitalize on the announcements of the plan to vilify the West and Ukraine. Lukashenko breathed new life into the Kremlin's Transnistria information operation by falsely claiming that opening the Transnistria front would be in the West's interests. Russian authorities detained more than 50 people at anti-war demonstrations in 14 Russian cities on February 24. Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin and his supporters criticized Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu over his son-in-law Alexei Stolyarov's alleged Instagram likes of anti-war posts. Russian forces continued to conduct ground attacks north of Svatove and near Kreminna. Russian forces made marginal territory gains around Bakhmut and Avdiivka and continued to conduct group attacks across the Donetsk Oblast front line. Russian forces continue to struggle to conduct effective combat operations on the Zaporizhia Oblast front line. Russian forces are continuing to suffer significant losses on the battlefield, prompting some me bloggers to criticize the Russian Ministry of Defense (MOD) for failing to recognize the scale of the casualties. Russian authorities are exploiting Ukrainian children from Mariupol as propaganda to falsely portray Russia as the savior of occupied areas. Now, on 27 February 2023, the losses of the Russian forces, total combat losses in Ukraine. We received this information on February 26, but on the Eastern Hemisphere, where is Ukraine and here Russia, Ukraine-Russian war, it's February 27 already. So, beginning from 24 February 2022, so last year, until now, during this year, 3 days, Russian combat losses are the following: 184,690 liquidated personnel, casualties. So killed soldiers, officers, and 20 generals. 3,385 tanks. 6,621 armored personnel vehicles. 2,380 artillery systems, including 475 MLRS, which is multiple launched rocket systems. 247 anti-aircraft warfare systems, 300 aircraft, 282 helicopters, 2,048 UAV operation tactical levels. It means on unmanned air vehicles, UAV. 873 cruise missiles, 18 warships, 5,248 vehicles and fuel tanks, 230 special equipment. These are the combat losses of Russia in Ukraine during 1 year. And Russian high official Dmitry Medvedev says arms supplies to Kiev threaten global nuclear catastrophe. Russia's former president and an ally of President Vladimir Putin said in remarks published on Monday that the continued arms supply to Kiev risks a global nuclear catastrophe, reiterating his threat of nuclear war over Ukraine. So, these are the last news from the Ukraine war, and uh, hopefully Ukraine could win after a counter-offensive which will start in March, April of this year. We wish Ukrainian people victory, and the people of Ukraine is fighting for its liberty, for its freedom, for the freedom of Europe, for the freedom of America. This is why we must support the Ukrainian people. We must stand with Ukraine army, Ukrainian people. Slava Ukraine.